At this time, within your southern show ring, we have, beginning with class number 1 of prospect feeder heifers. This is class 1. We have Wyatt Ramey from Glenrock, Wyoming, Austin Bamford from Arvada, Colorado, Keith Page from Akron, Colorado, Miranda Leatherman from Arvada, Emery Chamberlain from Ray, Colorado, Hunter Clark from Broomfield, New Mexico, Anna Taylor from Olathe, Colorado, Braylon Lesky from Durango, Dax Siebert from Maxville, Kansas, Ashton Etzen from Franktown, Colorado, Kara Reynolds from Laramie, Wyoming, Americo Lorenzini from Weldona, Colorado, Tinley Weathers from Yuma, Colorado, and Sydney Mintling from Hayes Centers, Nebraska. Again, this is class number 1 of prospect feeder heifers with a weight range of 556 to 730.
Well, good. Testing. How we doing? Good? Bingo. All right. Well, good late morning. Obviously, I am not Cheryl. You can call me Scott. I'm the backup plan, and we hope Cheryl has a speedy recovery. And it is an honor to be asked to stay an extra day and work through this show. Obviously, this is one of the real highlights of the National Western Stock Show. As a judge, it's always a good feeling when one walks in like this red one in the first class of the morning, because again, there's a lot of things in a market division I think she ties together pretty nicely. She's got a little extra length of spine and body to her, and I think it's pretty obvious when you get in behind them and the way this one is shaped up high, especially as we go from her hooks back. You work into her pins, the lower part of her hip down at the surface. This one's got enough base width, but yet she still stays pretty collected in the way that she travels. So again, you're looking for a market animal that kind of puts the look and balance and certainly the muscle and the ability to keep growing and get to a heavy weight. I think we can kind of see that in this female here. I think the race for second becomes pretty close, and there's a lot of good heifers that follow her. Again, we're going to step back a little bit on muscle. I would never, ever get on the mic here this morning and talk about how powerful this one here is built. I think she's only adequate in terms of muscle. I think she'll always kind of be that way as we project her onto heavier weight. But one of the strengths I think we can see in this heifer is that, again, just her general structural design, her build, especially her length of hip and the way she's constructed off her hind leg. I thought she just looks a bit more comfortable in the way she travels out here in the ring, especially that rear third of her body. So if this heifer continues to power up as she matures and develops, she can sure be a nice player at kind of a mid-range weight in a market division. But if she don't make a market heifer, I bet that thing can make a pretty nice breeding heifer. Another one that, again, if we just kind of study him from behind, we want to shape him up and butt cut him, then this one here probably needs to go second. She's got a nice spread to her top, really shapely when we work in from behind this one here in terms of the turn to her hip and her quarter. And maybe a little too tight for me. Both ends, especially as we study her off her hind leg, we kind of shorten the hip up. We put a little rounder muscle shape, if you will, in here. I think it kind of affects her movement from the side. Really, we get in outside of that first heifer, you kind of watch these cattle from behind, even the heifer in second, but certainly one here in third and fourth. They get just a little bit base narrow. Again, there's kind of that fine line for me as to where we really set the legs from behind, but both her and the heifer in second, I would like to set them out just a little wider and square as we watch him go from behind. On the stand, I like this heifer in fourth. Again, she gives you good presence out here. She's pretty smooth and yet still has a pretty nice back shape and hip shape to her. Again, going to be kind of more in that adequate muscle category, I think, down the road. As we put her on the lead, she has a tendency of tighten up a little bit more in the middle of her spine. Again, maybe just not quite as comfortable in the way that one is constructed off her hind leg, but certainly young lady does a nice job. We get her put together out here on the side profile. You like her a lot. We go back up on a bit more muscle shape in this next one. Just raw bone and power, I think, is a good way to describe the heifer that ends up here in fifth. Again, a little bit off in her balance, a little deeper in her neck. That rib cage is just a little shallower and rounder right now. As she continues to develop and kind of get a little more fat and fill in her, I think that'll sure help. Again, I'm going to be a little tougher on her in terms of movement. She has a tendency to kind of knuckle up a little bit more occasionally on one or the other hind leg. Right now, obviously, it's her left hind leg. So those are things that if any of us could ever figure out why it happens, and it always happens at the show, we could make a lot of money on that. You know what? Again, nice heifer here design-wise. I look at this one more as a breeding animal just because of her skeleton, her design, her smoothness. Again, probably not really, kind of jazzed up in terms of muscle shape and just raw power like some of the market animals need to be, but good one from a skeletal design and balance standpoint here in the group. I think the gold heifer, again, probably the limitation on her is how big can she really get. Now, if she gets big enough, that's a good heifer. She's really bold in her ribs. She's got some muscle to her and some top. Again, a little shorter featured in her cannon, her skeleton in general will reach just a little quicker maturing for me. So I kind of think this would be a light middleweight, maybe a heavier lightweight, if you will, before she could possibly get too fat on us. But there's good value when you think about squareness and muscle and bone for a market animal. I think the next group here really, and I'm going to probably throw these two together here, bigger outlining cattle. They look like as market individuals down the road. They ought to have some cutability to them. They're trim and they're clean, probably just a little off in their skeleton today, and again, probably a little green yet, and as we continue to feed them, that'll sure help. Young man does a great job out here. I told his coach over here, don't worry, he's going to be a good showman. I don't know where you're at, but he was kind of worried about his coach. He did a great job. Again, probably a little more like a breeding animal than a market animal. She's very broody and big bodied and easy fleshing, but I like that young man. He's a lot of fun. I would say the same for the gold heifer. I don't know, we throw her in a market classification as much as I would as just a kind of a good breeding animal. She's got some volume, some rib to her. The heifer second from the end, just a little tight made in her rib and her hip, and then we end with the heifer. Again, a nice job here by a young showman. It's just, again, a little bit more on the breeding side for me in terms of her moderation of frame and volume, maybe just not quite as show ring fancy for a market animal. Nice class, and a really nice one to kind of get our bar set high here in our first individual in this particular class winner.
Your results from class number 1 of prospect feeder heifers. In 13th place, Wyatt Remy. 12th place, Austin Bamford. 11th place, Americo Lorenzini. 10th place, Ashton Etzen. 9th place, Miranda Leatherman. 8th place, Sydney Mintling. 7th place, Emery Chamberlain. 6th place, Tinley Weathers. 5th place, Cara Reynolds. 4th place, Anna Taylor. 3rd place, Keith Page. 2nd place, Hunter Clark. And your class winner is Braylon Lesky. Set to enter the ring at this time will now be class number 2 of prospect feeder heifers. We have a weight range of 732 to 799. We have Emma Fassett, Tinley Bivens, Justin Fannebecker, McKinley Long, Andrew Wilcox, Peyton Luark, Rory Wireman, Fat Cattle Company, Jackson Allen, Riley Joseph, Tatum Thompson, Wesley Witt, Jet Jameson, and Brant Volushin. Again, this will be class number 2 of prospect feeder heifers with a weight range of 732 to 799.
keep 4 out of this class. All right, very nice, and we certainly upped the ante quite a bit in this class here. We run deep in quality, and it's unfortunate this first one's not blessed with the good hair gene like the next two are, because I think we could carve this one out and make her look pretty good. But again, I look at this one here more long term. She's not quite as bloomy and maybe quite as woolly as the two they have behind him and carved out as nicely, but you start to kind of just put everything together. I don't think there is really any difference in real muscle between these first three, other than maybe the way they're carved out down their spine and from behind. So I think that's kind of a wash. I like the fact that this one here has just got more skeleton, the ability to grow and reach a heavier market weight, if that's what we're sure going to do with this animal here. And quite honestly, when we put these three on the lead here, really, this is the heifer that I favor the most in this class, because she has probably more times than not taken the right step off her hind leg, more comfortable than, in particular, the next two heifers that we work with here in the lineup. So I see this one as being bigger when it's all said and done as a market heifer, remaining high cutability. She's going to have enough muscle and probably have just a little bit more confidence in her skeleton long term down the road here. So congratulations to this young man, because I think this is a tough class. I don't know that there's a real answer as we get up here in these first half dozen or so heifers in the group. Standing, it's hard to not just kind of drop your jaw on the next two heifers here. They have that real shapely market look to them. They're carved out nice. They got that extra shape to their hip in the way that we have them presented out here. The fact that they got just a little more fuzz on their legs, especially the heifer here in second, makes them look big boned and kind of takes on that market characteristic, and I like that. I mean, we are in a market heifer division. This one here is really bold in her rib too, which I think that really helps. As you study her up high, that kind of shape she turns out of her spine, is a lot of it is rib cage, along with having obviously some muscle to her. Big boned, she's got those kind of characteristics on down the road for being a nice market animal. Here's the problem I have with her and the next heifer. It's just like this. Every step, one or the other foot digs her toe in the ground first and then tries to leave, and so as a result we end up with a hind leg or an ankle in particular that just don't quite work. And at a young age, it's a little bit concerning to me. We fed a few of those. Sometimes they get better. My experience, they don't. So again, it's always a bit of a challenge. This is a good showman. Young lady, you did great. Again, I think you got a lot of years of winning ahead of you. She gets this thing stopped and propped up. Again, excellent job. This thing's got a stellar look, stellar hair coat, presented very nicely out here. Takes on a lot of the same market shape of the heifer we just discussed, and the way she's turned down her top and out of her hip. Again, maybe a little nicer in the floor of her chest. She kind of gives you a high cutability look in the lower third of her body on down the road. Again, I'm going to pick on her just like I did the heifer ahead of her. She's just a little lethargic off her hind leg. She doesn't set it down quite as true in her ankle in the way that she leaves out here. I don't see this one being, right now at this stage of her development, quite as burly in her bone and just her general mass and shape like the heifer right ahead of her. But I think there's good, and really either one of those two heifers in second or third, if they stay correct in their skeleton enough, especially on that rear third, they're going to be big-time players. We're going to keep this heifer too. We're going to bring 4 of them back for a top 5 overall. This is one that's a little more unique in the lineup for the fact that she is probably naturally the biggest boned heifer in the group. She's got a good rib cage to her in terms of her heart and her flank. For me, again, a little bit more challenged as we watch this heifer move off the hind leg. And quite honestly, I don't look at this one as being quite as high cutability down the road. She's got a little bit of a fatter, softer look to her at a young age like this. She's not shaped up as good out of her back and over her loin like the 2 or 3 that we have up ahead of her. So again, she's got some pieces that probably can win the class, especially if you like the extra bone work and substance that she has. But I kind of look at this one long term. Again, a little bit of a question mark on her hind leg, but is she going to be quite as burly in terms of her real top shape on down the road? Another one, I said it in the first class, some of them kind of look more like a breeding animal than a market animal, and that's what I'd say about this one right here. She's real broody in her look, her rib cage. Again, a little bit more of a distance behind in terms of real muscle shape like we have up here in the top trio, but I think a nice kind of a female. The red heifer just a little twisted out up front. front. Maybe doesn't go, again, with quite the flex off her hind leg, in particular her joints down low. Standing really long, really trim in her middle, a decent amount of muscle. You know, quite honestly, for a market animal, she just needs a stouter head, a stouter jaw, and just in general, a stouter shape from all the way back there. But young lady does a nice job of getting her presented. Another one that her depth of body's good, her bone work's good. Again, just a little more average on the real muscle shape that she has. She just gets a little plainer down her top, a little flatter built. The big silver heifer, the thing I think we like about this one here, we get her at the right weight, which is going to be bigger than several ahead of her. This is going to be a pretty nice heifer. She's going to have some cutability to her, some length. So again, right now we've got one that's got just a little bit more framework in this class. Kind of strikes you as being just a little flatter and narrow in the way that she's constructed. So I think time is in her favor, and along with some feed and maturity, this can be a better heifer down the road. A little thicker necked, a little deeper kind here next, big boned. But again, as we kind of look at her as maybe a balance issue, as we get her to a middle heavyweight market heifer division, she might get just a little too thick up in front end and a little more coarseness. We'll kind of have to monitor that just a bit. I think really the next 3 or 4, particularly let's say 2 here, are cattle that have, I think, enough muscle shape to them. They're just a little too tight for me in the way that they travel, both ends, both shoulder and off their hind leg. The gold heifer, just a good practical female. We kind of keep her up there ahead of these other 3 just based on her skeleton. She's got some rib cage out of feet, pretty nice. Big old hip and that red blaze face. Big from behind, just a little bit, again, more challenged in terms of movement as we get her out here. And then we get into the other 2 heifers that have completing the class. You know, again, they're useful kind of cattle. They're probably just that combination of soundness and muscle maybe don't tie it together quite as nicely as we have up on the top end. Nice class. 4 of those heifers will come back for a top 5 here in just a minute.
Incredibly good division over here.
Over in your prospect feeder heifers, we have class number 3 in the ring. We have Madison McIntosh from Wheatland, Wyoming. Vienna Sells Jamie from Omaha, Nebraska. Jet Jameson from Lusk, Wyoming. Cara Felber from Dewey, Nebraska. Mary Friend from Montrose, Colorado. Kinsley Ford from Franktown, Colorado. Lillian Stavig from Lakewood, Colorado. Tyson Fox of Fort Morgan, Colorado. Aubrey Johnson from Montrose. Sailor Wireman from Idalia, Colorado. And Susanna Sinclair from Fergus, Ontario. This again is your class number 3 of prospect feeder heifers, ranging from 810 to 972 pounds.
All right, great class. We opened the gate and we brought a bunch of nice ones in here. We're going to keep 5 heifers in this class to come back for our top 5 overall, and I think deservingly we need to. You know, again, time tells. I think when I try to put, you know, some of the market traits together with one that I feel pretty comfortable with in terms of skeleton, I feel pretty good about this one here. She's nice, I think, in the way she's designed in her skeleton. Again, to make her perfect, we'd like to take that neck and set it just a little bit differently out of her blade, and really I would pick on all of these, and most cattle, it seems like, just the way they move out of their front end. We got them just a little bit steeper up front, but I think the way her shoulder lays in to her rib cage, and then we come up into her back, and again, not the biggest back, biggest pinned one in the class, but she's still shaped right. I think the upper part of her skeleton's made right. We still see a nice turn in terms of her back shape, and you come back into her hip, she's wide enough. I think those market traits sure exist in her, and yet she's still got, I think, a very functional skeleton to her. She gets out and she looks nice on the move. This young lady gets her parked and her head thrown up. She looks pretty good. Now, reservations. Kind of got a sissy head. Not one of those things that looks like she wants to stand at the feed bunk and gain 3 pounds a day. It's one of those that, again, if you really think about market cattle and them big stout-headed, big-jawed cattle that can grow and gain, we don't see that in that one. And so, again, will she make a heavyweight? I don't know. She could. It might take a little extra time. Probably have a little more faith in this one doing that, because she is one of them really stout, heavy-duty kind in terms of bone work and just her general dimension. What happens with the heifer in second, again, with that extra stoutness comes a little bit of some holes in her. You know, she's just a little bit more opened up in her blade, the way it sets into her rib cage. Again, just maybe doesn't handle her front end quite right. I don't know that she's got great feet. She's got good enough feet, I hope, to get a big heavyweight. She should make a heavyweight, because that thing has as much bone work underneath her, as much back shape, and certainly as much hip as anything that we've seen in here in the show. And she should, because she's at a heavier weight. So, again, one of those that there's some reservations in terms of, you know, how does she hold everything together as we get her bigger and heavier? Does she stay, you know, quite right out of her front end? She has a tendency to just kind of throw them things around. I'm going to say a little bit of it's her attitude. She's kind of got them alert ears and eyes, and we get her a little more relaxed out of here, that'll change her. But burly, and yet still, when you study that one's hip and hind leg and the way that she travels, that's where she beats the brockle face. If we didn't have to walk them, you know, this is probably game over right here. That thing is really good in terms of her rib cage. She's bold in her shape. She's got a nice feeder look to her because of her bone. And again, a little stouter featured about her head than her class winner. Big square, and she's really nice up high in her hip in terms of the way she comes to her pins. This is where I struggle with her. Again, we have a lot of things we got to take into consideration. I worry a little bit about that one, in particular off her hind leg. You know, she's a little shorter hipped anyway, and the fact she tightens up quite a bit at the ground here in terms of her foot and the way she sets it to the soil. She knuckles up, tightens up just a little bit in her ankle, and it's going to be a challenge because that one can make a heavier weight because she is pretty dense and pretty stout. This one could be long-term. Again, today, green, flat rib, not there. She probably will never be as burly in her shape as a couple of heifers ahead of her because she's not built that way. But her length of body, her freshness, again, one of those that we can make a big heavyweight out of this heifer here because she's going to have some extra skeletal work. If she continues to mature, develop, and get, again, some top shape in her, it's kind of that middle part of her body right now that gets to be a little bit of a limiting factor. Part of it is she's kind of flat-ribbed anyway, and she doesn't have the back shape. That'll be the challenge for her. So, again, I think there's a lot of upside to this one here. Just giving her some time and again some maturity, I think, can sure help her. Again, we asked 5 to come back, and I think we need to because I think there's a lot of good in this heifer here, especially when we get her stopped. She's got some presence to her. You know, everything kind of fits together right. Obviously shaped up really good. Her back shape, her hip shape's really good. Probably set their tail head in differently. Again, redesign her hip. It's a little too short and round for me. It kind of affects, I think, the motion of her hind leg and the way she sets it again on her feet. I think that affects her. And sometimes there's that fine line. You all know that. We get them big and round muscled and stout, and then we have to really kind of face the challenge on do we keep them sound enough. Again, standing, I like this one a lot. This silver heifer, nice bodied, enough muscle. Again, she's got some good market traits to her. Her bone work is good. She just gets a little too tight made in that last third of her body in terms of the way she handles both of her hind legs and her pin set. Just doesn't go as flexible as she needs. And probably when you get right back off the side and compare those 5 ahead of her, maybe don't hit you quite as hard in terms of wow factor because she's got a little more lower shoulder and chest, a little more belly in her. And again, for a market animal, that might be good for me, or breeding animal might be good for me, but for a market animal, I like to keep them pretty trim made. Good heifer here. Just need to kind of power this one up a little bit. She's got great presence standing. Again, one that's just a little bit more challenged in terms of structure. But right now, just a little flat, a little narrow made in this weight division. The silver heifer, good feeding kind, good body. Probably needs a nickel more bone, just a little bit more of the bells and whistles, if you will, in terms of kind of capture your attention when she walks in the ring here. This next black heifer, again, got a nice hair coat to her. There's some ability for this heifer to gain some weight and some conditioning, I think, Sarah. Just a little flatter muscled and kind of really like we have in all three of them here. You'd probably like to just design them a little bit differently if we could in terms of the structure. This one in particular up in through her shoulder. The red heifer is more impressive from behind. I like the pin set and the width in her, but she gets just a little bit more up in her neck and lower shoulder and sternum, so it has a tendency to kind of throw her out of balance. Again, this is the best heifer that we had to wind up with today in the market division. That's a good feeding heifer right there. She's got some value to her in terms of rib and some muscle. Again, just a little more prominent in her shoulder, a little higher in her tail head. I really appreciate the depth in this class. Congratulations to all of them, and next set of market heifers here for down the road.
Your results from class number 3 of prospect feeder heifers: in 11th place, entry 11787 from Lillian Stavig. 10th place is Aubrey Johnson. 9th place, Kinsley Ford. 8th place, Sailor Wireman. 7th place, Mary Friend. 6th place, Cara Felber. 5th place is Jet Jameson. 4th place, Tyson Fox. 3rd place, Madison McIntosh. 2nd place, Susanna Sinclair. And your class winner is Vienna Sells Jamie. At this time, within your feeder heifer show, we will bring back our class winners to select your top 5.
right, great start here, people, in our market heifer division. And again, I think every class winner sure represents good kind. And then we've had several that follow in here and we're able to pick a top 5. Wish we could pick even a few more than that, because I think there's some good ones that we're probably going to leave out of this top 5 that sure have a lot of potential here on down the road. I guess again, it's just trying to keep everything together for a market heifer show. Obviously, we need to think about those traits. They're going to have enough muscle, and we're going to get them right in terms of finish and weight. I think one of the big challenges we had here in this particular division is we've got some that are very muscular. We're going to be able to keep them sound enough, and that was always a hurdle. I don't care if it's this ring or the one next door. You all know that's kind of the hurdle to be able to kind of get that done. But we're able to do that very nicely, I think, here with some of our champions. So give them all a nice hand. Let's give this young lady that's dressed like a queen right here, let's give her a nice hand. This will be our champion market heifer. Congratulations to her. Good job.
Your grand champion prospect feeder heifer comes from class number 3, and that is the first place winner from Vienna Sells Jamie of Omaha, Nebraska. Rolling into consideration will be the second place from class number 3, and that is Susanna Sinclair.
All right, let's give our classmate a nice hand. That'll be our reserve champion market heifer. Congratulations.
Your reserve grand champion prospect feeder heifer also comes from that same class, class number 3, and that is Susanna Sinclair of Fergus, Ontario. Your third overall prospect feeder also comes from that third class. That is entry from Madison McIntosh of Wheatland, Wyoming. Your fourth overall prospect feeder heifer continues to come from class number 3, and that is Tyson Fox of Fort Morgan, Colorado. And your fifth overall within your prospect feeder heifers is your class winner from class number 2, and that is Jet Jameson from Lusk, Wyoming.
Yeah, if you ladies want to go ahead and peel around, we've got our class winner out here. Young lady here, and the scarf's going to be second, and then here in the vest will be third. So we get off to a pretty nice start. Again, I think there's just a lot of options, and depending on what your priorities kind of set on, you have maybe a different favorite calf out here, and rightfully so. I think outside of this heifer's head, there's a lot of things I like about her. She's a little kind of long and kind of got a ugly-looking beak on her for a muzzle, but from there back very nice, because honestly her head doesn't match the rest of her body. I think within this group you study her at the floor of her chest, her lower third of her rib cage, her surface down low, her base width, really good in this group. I like the way she's able to have some real natural body width up high too, and her springer rib, her pin set. She gives you a nice look too when we get her standing out here. I would pick on all of them a little bit structurally. I would probably pick on her the least. Probably just need to square up, and the way she sets her feet down to the ground here from behind, she rolls out just a little bit. But the heifers that follow her maybe are a little straight for me up in their shoulder, and they just are a little lethargic in the way that they move. Standing, I like these two the way they are here in second and third. I think the length of body, the depth of rib right now, and I think even down the road I see this one as having the ability to keep just a little more middle third in her than what we maybe have here in third. She does give up some dimension when you get in behind her, not only to the heifer that beats her, but also this heifer right here. I think down the road, especially as you go back into the tail head, the pin set, just the dimension from one end to the other, the boldness, that could be an advantage of this heifer we have right here in front of it. Winds up in third. Again, a little like the heifer ahead of her. She struggles a little bit on the move for me, and right now just kind of at that stage of her life where she's just a little shallower, a little rounder in the rib, maybe never going to have quite that blessed flank and lower third to her like maybe the two ahead of her. But nice female. I think that's a pretty close call. I like this heifer standing a lot too. Our young cowboy here is showing. She's got a nice soft coat of hair. Rib cage is really good. She's kind of got a broody head and neck on her. I mean, those things, for a cow down the road, I think you can sure appreciate the durability that she could potentially has. Again, I'm going to just be a little tougher on her in movement, just really the last third of her body. But you kind of go from her hocks to the surface here. That's where she gets a little tangled up and just doesn't set it down quite as square. Actually, the silver and the gold heifer right here behind me, fellas, you got a nice pair of just good, useful cows. They're not always going to win a lot of shows, but hopefully their value is when we get them kicked out into production, they're going to have some durability, some rib to them, just to have that real stunning presence out here in the ring. Maybe not. I think we just like to give them a little more presence out here. I like the stoutness of hind leg, the mobility of the silver heifer over the gold heifer. She gets just a little tighter moving off her hip and her hind leg, but both of them big, wide body, good doing kind of cattle. Young lady got a nice heifer too. She's a little out of balance from the side, a little plainer up in her neck, and set that old tail head just a little bit differently into her spine. It would sure change her. Very muscular. She got a lot of rib cage to her. Just like to change her design. Really, the next one, good looking, and partner, he's a tough kid. He got stepped on if you weren't paying attention. He's lucky he didn't break his ankle, but he's done a good job out here. He's got a very nice looking heifer. She's heavy boned, a little shallower made in her rib cage, just a little tight. I think kind of as a general rule as we go down through the rest of them, it's kind of a thing of structure that we'd like to do or change most of them if we could. I think they're, again, good cattle that have some design and some cleanliness to them. They just need to be loosened up a little bit in their lower thirds. Good job, gang. Good work. Good job.
Your results from class number 1 of prospect breeding heifers. In 12th place, McKinley Dono. 11th place, Paisley Sidwell. 10th, Doug Clapper. 9th place, Kim O'Neill. 8th place, Case Carnahan. 7th, Claire Harkin. 6th, Ian Madden. 5th place, Bo Ullman. 4th place, Brecklin Smith. 3rd place, Emery Clark. 2nd place, Kansas Lange. And your class winner, Emma Fawcett. over to your prospect breeding heifers in the ring at this time is now class number 2. We have Kim O'Neill from Silt, Colorado, Logan Teeter from Rifle, Colorado, Randy Clements from New Raymer, Colorado, Ainsley Lee Marundi from Sarcoxie, Missouri. We have Marin Cowell from Ellendale, Minnesota, Ella Rogers from Burlington, Colorado. We have another entry from Kim O'Neill of Silt, Colorado. We have Ian Madden of Laramie, Wyoming. We have Marianne Fassett of Olathe, Colorado. We have Jet Jameson from Lusk, Wyoming. We have Cara Reynolds from Laramie, Wyoming. We also have Piper Warren of Kiowa, Colorado. Trevor Williams from Riverton, Wyoming. Michael Labato from Monta Vista, Colorado. And Jania DeCassi of Era, Colorado. This is class number 2 of prospect breeding heifers. We have weight range of 666 all the way up to 752.
Well, as we get into our second class of breeding heifers, again, we've upped the ante quite a bit. And quite honestly, I think you can do a lot of different things. You know, today, this one has a huge advantage in maturity. Her rib cage, you know, she's got a little more on her in terms of conditioning. And, you know, it doesn't necessarily give me the reason to use her, but I think even when we melt her down, she's still beautiful in her underline. I love the way she hooks her rib into her blade, so nice in her top. You know, where I would pick on her is maybe not so much of that. It's probably for me, she's a nickel shorter in her hip. She's a little steeper. As you kind of trace her from her stifle to the cap of her hock, and then as she takes a step, she does exactly what you would expect. She comes up just a nickel short in her stride, but she still works her joints right. She flexes good. You know, I think she moves quite a bit truer out of her front end and her foot placement at the ground, kind of keeping her blades together a little bit nicer than the gold heifer here in second. I like this heifer in second, too. I like her body length. And again, she kind of gives you a real youthful, calfy look, and yet still has some real dimension inside of her. Her width of chest, her pin set, you know, from one end to the other, this one's opened up pretty good. I like her length of body. I think, again, everything's constructed right in her hip and her hind leg. Up front, maybe you could change her just ever so slightly. She wants to kind of set down and roll in just a little bit on her front toes. It has a tendency then to kind of open up a little bit more at the top side of her blade. And, you know, as a big, heavy bred, that won't be quite as noticeable maybe as a calf does today. But, again, very nice. I think she kind of sets in here very comfortably as one of the two we really need to consider to win this class. Give them time. This one here in third could give them all they want. Again, we can see she's pretty green broke. She's kind of a little antsy out here, kind of jumping around, but good looking, fresh. Again, has a look of a calf to me, the ability to keep growing and gaining. She's good in terms of her basic skeleton, I think, and movement. You know, right now she's just a little flatter built. She doesn't have quite the bloom to her, but I think there's better days ahead for this one here, and I would be certainly very tickled if I was this young lady to have one this nice to kind of bring on down the road. I think as a later fall show, maybe even earlier here in this summer, that one could be pretty good. Partner, I tell you what, you got a good heifer. We're going to work a little harder on getting her presented. She's a little piecey, you know. She's a little more opened up in her shoulder, gets a little around her hip, but nothing in here can match that one in terms of her shape, her bone work, you know, again, there are times where that thing can just get in your eyeball and say, wow. And then we have another time where she gets to be a little bit more of a struggle to put together. It's kind of up high in her upper hip or upper shoulder, so we're going to get her home and work a little harder on getting her presented because I think that one, too, has just a world of future to her. We're going to ask 4 of those heifers to be on deck for pick our top 5 here later on. The shorthorn marked heifer, again, standing, I think she has great presence. Alert, nice neck, pin set's good, enough muscle for me. We don't need to make them big, steery ass like we have next door. This one's got enough muscle to make a female. A little straight. She wants to kind of throw her front feet out a little bit. Again, just a little short. She's got a nice ankle, but the angle of her hock, and again, being a little shorter in her hip, it kind of ties her up just a little bit of mobility, but a nice one. This Baldy, again, she can give you a good look when we get her stopped. Got that good bald head, a nice neck, got a bold shape up high to her. Again, just a little off on both ends. She kind of has a tendency to throw her front feet out. Just a little ginger in the way she sets off her hind leg. Got a nickel set to it anyway, and then she kind of curls it up underneath her body and just doesn't set it to the surface and really tromp out here like I'd like to see her. But again, a nice heifer that I think's really bold in her shape. She's got some pretty cool breeding pieces to be fun to take home and work with. We have one that's got more bone, again, blessed with maybe a little more leg hair. I think the flexibility is pretty good at this one here, especially off her hind leg. Her body depth is good. Just a little more compact. I like to keep a little extra frame in these breeding cattle. This one here is a little flatter built too. When you kind of study her general shape of her rib and her hip, she doesn't have the same kind of bold shape to her. But again, nice breeding pieces with her. This red heifer, or the Heifer marked heifer, we get in here and kind of start studying her just from a body standpoint. That's where she gets just a little bit trouble, a little later maturing kind that's got the frame and the length to her, and we get her in, and I assume she kind of probably could fit in a purebred show pretty handily, kind of hold her own. We just got to get a little more maturity, a little more rib in her. Really, what I would say here for these next two, they're nice cattle standing. They're just a little too tight on the move for me. I'd like to loosen them up a little bit. Our senior member out here, he's just as old as me, so 60 ain't nothing, buddy. And I want to be 16 again too. But anyway, Red Angus heifer, nice cow. You know, she's big-bodied, and again, I think as a cow, one you can kick out, don't worry about. Obviously, in the show ring here, just a little finer bone, not quite the presence to her. Again, one that's got a cleaner look. We just got to lengthen her hip up and change the way this one here goes off her hind leg a bit for me. And then we end up with 3 heifers that I like the frame. They're a little later coming cattle, I think, if you will. And basically, again, just kind of putting the right kind of skeleton together with, the movement and the dimension that they need is kind of the key for them. And hopefully that dimension stuff will come here as we get them a little older, a little more mature. Okay, in our first division, again, congratulations to everybody getting to take a second trip out here to the ring. We're going to keep the 4 heifers that we just saw in the second class as 1 through 4, and then we're going to come back and use our Class 1 winner to be our 5th hole. So let's give all of them a nice hand. Congratulations to everybody, and we'll see you back here in a few minutes for a grand drive. Thank you.
Coming into the ring at this time for your prospect breeding heifers is class number 3. We have Braden Hawkins from Ottumwa, Iowa. Hayden Page from Akron, Colorado. Lorelei Brammer from Kiowa, Colorado. Reed Pratt from Pueblo, Colorado. Trevor Williams from Riverton, Wyoming. Jackson Walker from Greeley, Colorado. Reese Locke from Sterling, Colorado. Blake Lapine from Gardner, Kansas. Hadley Cooper from Powell, Wyoming. Kim O'Neill from Silt, Colorado. Taylor Otto from Ponca City, Oklahoma. And Dakota Rogers from Clifton, Colorado. These are prospect breeding heifers with a weight of 770 to 821.
Well, again, just a really nice class. It's solid, it's strong, and quite honestly, when I started to think, well, let's work up from the bottom to the top, it gets pretty tough. You know, you just don't come in here and say, well, there's clearly a bottom end and a top end. I think the quality and the depth speaks for itself. And again, we have enough variety of type and kinds. You may like something way different here in the next 3 to 6 slots than I do, and that's perfectly fine. I guess I would argue pretty strong if there's not one that kind of does the things that I like in the heifers in second and third and fourth in that real complete package up here on the top end. You got a nice showman that does present a very nice heifer. I think, again, I think it's really important for breeding cattle to have the ability to get their neck up out of their shoulder, the angle of their blade, their knee. Again, the front end deal, we have focused so long for so many years to fix that really cool hind leg, and we totally forgot about there's 4 legs on animals, and we've had a hard time getting the shoulders right. I think these two up here on the top end do it very nicely. The difference is, obviously, this one's just got more stuff to her. You know, obviously she got more hair, but I think the bone work, the extra dimension, whether it be rib cage, hip, you know, I think everybody in the barn can sure say that is a proven fact. But I will guarantee you there ain't anything so far that I've seen today that has that presence of this heifer here in second. She comes in here, throws that neck up. She's got the ability to get up out of her blade right, sets her ear down. She's like, look at me, you know, and beautiful rib cage. The skeleton is just spot on her. You know, if you think it's more important to have breeding cattle, have big bones and maybe a little bulkier than her, then I can appreciate that. But I promise you I'll take a herd full to look like her, because I can find plenty of sires that will add the bone and add the dimension. Very few will add the structural quality, you know, just the female character that I believe I see in her. So again, I could be just as easily to say we could start with that one, because that one has a presence that I think just really kind of cries female written all over her. This one in third, I think, again, long-term is going to be pretty nice. You know, she's a little bit gangly looking for me right now. It doesn't quite fit it all together, especially as we study her up in her pin set and her hind leg. But still, I think the knee is set right in her. Her blade is good. Her skeleton, she's got some length of spine. Length of hip is good. You know, everything, I think, kind of works right. I think what she needs is just more time yet to kind of come into herself. Obviously, we want to stouten her up just a little bit, you know, from her hooks to her pins and the way she drives off her hind leg. But everything's right. The skeleton's there. I think we just got to get those, and again, a little more alert out here in the ring and just a little more presence. Oh, Blue, stout. She is a wide-built, square-made one that's, again, just chock full of muscle. You know, for me in a breeding heifer, maybe just a little bit too much. I'd like to lengthen her out in her hip. I'd like to set her blade back and set her knee back in her a little bit differently. Certainly take that tail head and set it way down, because it just kind of makes her look a little too terminal. So again, there's a lot of people sitting out here ringside say, I'd like to take that one home and raise a steer, and I bet you can, you know, because she's got that extra squareness and with the build to her that sure allow you to do it. I guess for me, as a breeding guy, I kind of like to just kind of change the skeleton a little bit in her. Now, I will say, the heifer that follows her in terms of her mobility is really quite good. You know, she's got the length of step to her. Again, probably flexes a little bit nicer than the blue heifer. It's just one of those deals where how much are you willing to give up? You know, and this one here is just a bit flatter built in her rib cage. As we work back into her pin and really just everything from behind, just not quite there yet. You know, she's a little flatter made, just in general kind of built that way. But I do like, and I think we'll appreciate this one down the road in terms of skeleton again and the ability to stay sound. I think she sure has that in her. Another one too, just like her, just not quite as long and maybe not quite as lean. This heifer's built good. I think her feet and legs kind of go the right direction. She's got a nice rib cage, just not overwhelming in terms of the power and punch that she has, and then just a little more jammed up in her neck and out of her front end, maybe not quite as flexible. But that's a good heifer. Again, I don't want this young lady to leave the ring and say, well, I didn't like her. No, I like her a lot. Happens to be a pretty tough class. I don't know if this is a purebred Red Angus or not, but if she is, kudos. That's a good heifer. You know, I like this one a lot from her first rib back. Length of body, a good strong hip. Still got the right kind of bone work. Again, I don't need a big round bone for heifers. I think she's got enough. This one's a little more prominent in her shoulder, her chest. Just doesn't hook up quite as good up in the front third of her body, but really long in her spine. Got a nice rib cage. Again, probably will appreciate her a bit more as a cow than we will as a show heifer. This is one that, again, I think we can like for some of the pieces she has. Big bone, nice rib cage, big hip, Pins are in her nice. To me, she kind of runs downhill. She's a little low-fronted. I don't like her head. Again, she's a little too kind of long beak, flat-jawed. I think she just needs to be, for the kind of rib cage she has, a muscle, a little stouter, featured up into her front end. Probably, again, like to loosen her up a little differently out of her shoulder movement out of her front. But, again, nice hair. There's a lot of things this young lady can take home. When we get the right sire selection, we could probably raise a pretty nice one. Good kind of muscular-shaped heifer here, just a little rounder in their hip shape, a little more set to her hind leg. We have really three nice heifers, and especially the two that we kind of wind up here, the black heifer and the roan heifer. Those are good cattle. I started to kind of think about when we go to place these, you know, you can't get real critical because those heifers have some quality to them and some balance. Black heifer just a little off on her hind leg. The roan heifer, she needs some time yet, you know, in relation to her frame. She's just a little empty looking here in her flank. Got a nice cow here, young lady. She don't have quite the bells and whistles of the show heifer, but again, very practical as far as the cow is concerned. All right. Again, just incredible, especially up here on the top end. Sometimes I find myself, I'm like, well, I'm probably a little old school right now. I like a little more length and extension. I like these females that can do just what that thing is doing right there. Look like I want to be a prideful young female out here. She's alert, up-headed. Again, the reason she can get her neck out of her shoulder the way she does is because of her blade, the way it's set back into her spine. She's got the right kind of set to her knee. Again, I'm not one that thinks you have to have zero chest tucked up there, but she fortunately does, and then she still has a nice underline to go with it. I know for some of you, she's not near far enough along in condition, and I promise you I will never beat a heifer this time of year because she's too skinny, because I've never seen a show heifer that someday don't get fat enough. This one here, when she comes into herself, I think she can be a handful. I just love this one's skeleton. I love her youthful look, her ability to make a good big kind of a donor cow that still has great presence out here in the show ring. So, young lady, you got a nice heifer. I wish you the best of luck down here the road. You're off to a very good start here. When they came in, again, this one you're drawn to very quickly that ends up in second. Beautiful coat of hair, further along in her rib cage, stouter in her hip. She's blessed with really nice leg hair, and again, I think she's got an awesome hind leg. A little more jammed up in her neck, not quite as good in the angle of her blade and her knee like the class winner, but again, that is a very, very nice heifer. And when she walked in, I thought, wow. And then this one comes in, and so again, it just makes for, I think, a really nice pair of heifers, and I'm, again, very thankful those two exhibitors were able to bring them out here and share them with us. Again, this is a little more my speed, and I know a lot of you probably think, well, she's a little hard-looking, and she doesn't have, the wolf to her right now, but again, just so up-headed, alert, nice up in her skeleton. She's not probably ever going to be as massive in her lower third and just from one end to the other like the two that are ahead of her, even though today she is a little greener conditioning. I would like to take that one's tail head a little differently into her spine if we could, and again, you kind of get in behind him. This one does get just a bit base narrow compared to them first two, but again, it's kind of like the pair we started with. I think we can say the same thing about the two that end up here in third and fourth, just a little more my speed here in third. Now, when this one came in, this young man here was one of the first of the top end that kind of hit the ring, that hit me pretty hard, and I thought, you know what, again, we have to appreciate some things about this heifer that maybe some of the other ones don't. For one, it starts at the ground. I think she's got great feet. She's one of the few that's really got some heel to her. The shape are pretty good in terms of her toes. Good knee in that one there, and again, I think her hock works right. She's a little awkward when we get up on the top side of her skeleton. She's a little bit rounder up in her shoulder, especially up high. Maybe doesn't stay quite as nice today in her hip, and I think a lot of that's just, again, her attitude. She's a little bit more wound up. Dimensionally, that heifer's very good. There's some real honest chest width. Again, some spread to that heifer from one end to the other, and I think she's going to make, again, a better one down the road as she continues to grow. It's another nice heifer. Again, I'm a bigger fan of her as she stands. I like her body style. Again, she's got some female character to her. Not quite as good in the way she's constructed in her hind third. Her pin set, her hind leg, whether you kind of study her from the side, you get in behind her and watch her go. That's where that heifer needs to be just a little stronger to kind of work up there in that top four. But she's a good one. Very nice heifer. Oh, white legs again, big boned. Again, really burly shaped in terms of her rib cage and the spring of it. She's going to have some muscle to her. Again, for me, just a little too much roundness of bone and just not a real maternal shape in her shoulder and her rib right now. And one of those that, for me, if I was to have one like that, I'd probably try to raise a steer out of her because she's kind of got those extras that could sure do that. There's no doubt about it. Next heifer, again, nice, just smooth and good body. She's a little more challenged out of her front end in terms of the angle of her shoulder. Doesn't sit down quite as true and straight on either ends, really, because of being a little too steep. But you get her stopped. Her body style is nice. Her ribs, she'll make a moderate cow that's pretty easy to flesh. The baldy really long. Again, she's got some cleanliness in her lower third. Probably right now a little bit harder rib. Just going to be a little gangly for a while until we kind of get some maturity on her and maybe get a calf inside of her. This one stop looks very nice. She's just a little tighter made up in her spine and her tail head. And again, just goes a little hard out here. But stop, young lady, you got to go in there. She looks good. She's got good presence to her. Nice cow prospect here, and the other black heifer just a little bit more more chest, a little thicker neck, but her depth of body's good. She's got adequate muscle. She just doesn't quite hit you quite as hard from the standpoint of balance. Again, probably like to redesign the structure in the next 3. I think, again, this class was one of those that you can't get real critical from one end to the other because I think there's some good cattle. These 3 actually have some growth and frame left to them. They'll be big cows when it's all said and done, but you can probably change each of them just a little bit in terms of the way they're built underneath in terms of feet and legs.
Your results from class number 4 of prospect breeding heifers. In 13th, we have Ty Martinez. 12th, Logan Teeter. 11th, Fat Cattle Company. 10th, Jay Mittling. 9th, Davey Frost. 8th, Michael Lobato. 7th, Braden Hawkins. 6th place, Bristol Wireman. 5th, Braden Hawkins. 4th place, Turner Longacre. 3rd place, Zelina Fisher. 2nd place, Justin Fannenbecker. And your class winner is Hannah Fox. Set to enter the ring at this time for your prospect breeding heifers will be class number 5. We'll have entries from Ryan Carlson, Madison McIntosh, Allison Taylor, Mary Friend, Delaney Greiman, Elizabeth Quick, Charlie Marinville, Jackson Allen, Ella Rogers, Adley Block, Turner Longacre, Job Knight. Class number 5 of prospect breeding heifers will have a weight range of 914 to 1123.
All right, this again, just a great way to kind of wind things down here. And honestly, it looks a little like a cow-calf pair. We got a lot of difference in maturity here, and I'm going to presume age, but you never know today. I think just the physical appearance would say the red heifer looks quite a bit older than the black one, and it maybe becomes a little bit of her issue too. I think I see just a little bit more prominence of blade up high, opened up a little bit more, and lower shoulder. But again, they're both very nice, and it's hard. I'd like to have really a different class for you young man to sit in, because you kind of look like a fish out of water out here. You know, you got a big old stout heifer. It's a very nice one that wins. Now again, I'm going to tell you, I'm not a big fan of her head. I don't like that jaw. She needs more substance of jaw and head to her, but nice in her neck. She blends so nice in her shoulder up high, her rib cage. She's flexible. In fact, young lady, she looks much better on the move than when she stands, and that's part of cattle that are that sound. They're a little looser made in her spine. She becomes a little bit more of a challenge to get put together when you stop, and that's, again, one of those things where if we can kind of strengthen her up out of her blade, and, you know, a lot of you are going to say, well, she's got some sternum and some chest, and she does. She's got some conditioning down there. She's probably like the red heifer, a little fatter inside, and so I think that affects them just a little bit. But in this particular heifer here, we put her on the move. I think she looks really good. I like, again, her knee. She's soft in the way she sets down out of her front end. For me, when cattle look better moving than standing, I think that's a good thing. You got to work a little hard when they're a little loose top to get them, again, to look quite right out here. And I think, you know, again, I might be wrong. I've been wrong lots of times in my life, except for the gal that I married. I would say this one, because she's youthful, it helps her. You know, she looks fresher in her neck and her shoulder, and to me, it just kind of makes her look like, again, a prospect heifer. Again, I don't want to sound like I don't like this red one. She tromps in here, you're like, oh, that thing is a beast. And again, to have that kind of bold shape and that kind of muscle, to be that long and still be as flexible as she is, that's good. You need to be, I think, rewarded with that. There's no doubt about it. It's just one of those deals where, you know, she just looks a little mature-headed, neck, shoulder, all that. And I try to bounce that around in my mind and see exactly what I want to do up here on the top end. But I like them both very well. I just think there's just a little more freshness. And again, the shoulder blade, particularly the scapula pies, a little nicer it ties into than maybe the red heifer out here. Again, both of them very nice. I like the Baldy too. When she first came in here, I thought, you know, them things are players, and I think from her hooks forward, a person needs to really appreciate her. I don't know that she's quite as true again off either end. She has a tendency to kind of throw those front feet out. Because she's a little shorter hipped, I think she doesn't look as flexible in that rear skeleton as the first two heifers who in here. You know, we kind of see her short this way. You get in behind her, she tapers a little bit more into her pin. So again, kind of pull that tail head back out, lengthen her hip up. I think that changes her skeleton. Stopped, nice. She's good looking. I love Baldies. I think that's the money stripe on a lot of these cattle. But when you take one that has that kind of nice chest, the underline that she has, again, bold up in her rib. I like everything about her in her front two-thirds. I just like to modify that one a bit more as we get back from her hooks back and then down. But very nice heifer. Again, we're going to have her come back here in our final go-round. One here in fourth, again, a little bigger, greener, still needs more time. This will be a big bred heifer someday, because I see this one as being very youthful yet. She's green in her conditioning. Her skeleton's nice. Again, we just kind of run into a class where she don't really fit, kind of like the red heifer. You know, what do you do with one that's got this much more frame and just not quite enough wolf or horsepower to her right now? I appreciate her. I think she'll be good in time today. She's just, again, just a little different out here and not exactly sure where we need to set her. Another nice heifer. In fact, both of the heifers that come here next, I think were good cattle. And I think standing this heifer here I like quite well. She's a little nicer in her lower shoulder and really just her blade in general than the young lady's heifer. She balances up pretty nice. We get in behind this one here, and maybe like the heifer I talked about in third, from her hooks to her pins, not quite as good. She gets a little rounder shaped into her pins. Tailhead don't set her in quite right. I think I see a lot of the same similar issues with her and her rear skeleton like I did the Baldy. She's just not as good up in that front third like the Baldy was. Now, again, more bone and just kind of a truck full of power here in this next one. You know, she's a little lower set up front, a little more prominent in her shoulder, lower shoulder. We can see that. But what helps this one, though, is when you get in behind her, she also backs that up with a big rib cage, a big strong hip. Again, I thought she was just a little hard in the way she went off her hind legs. She don't sit down real true from behind, kind of got her old feet pointed out and doesn't flex quite as good in her hip. But that's a nice one. I think she'll be kind of a fun cow because, you know, in my world, it's stock stock fields, that kind survive pretty easily. Again, nice one here. We toned down a little bit in frame size, not as long, but just good and practical. Again, depth of rib is good. Everything fits together very nice on this heifer here. You just get a little out-horsed out here in a pretty deep class with some pretty big old rascals that you're competing against. The next heifer, again, in terms of her bone and muscle, she's as good as anything you work with. Again, just a little too tight for me in the way that she kind of is built from behind. She's got her tail head up a little high, a little rounder bone, just a little tougher in the way that she handles that hind leg. But boy, she's big boned and bold ribbed and muscular and all those things that maybe someday she can sit down and raise a pretty nice kind of a steer. Charolais heifer, good. Young lady, you've done a great job out here, and that heifer's got some length of body and some smoothness to her. Again, just a little deeper necked, and in relation to the frame right now, just this breed can be a little later coming, and that's what I kind of see in her. She just is going to need some time and some maturity yet, and get a big old calf in her, and that'll surely change this one, because I think structurally she sure got some value to her. This next heifer, again, her length of body's good, femininity's good. We probably need to be a little more conscious of her feet. She's a little shallow heel and kind of long-toed anyway, so keep an eye on them, because that's going to be pretty important to kind of keep her structure together. I think she flexes good enough. What we need to find here is one that's just a little better at the ground. And again, one of those that needs a little more time to get just a bit more to her. I like the muscle, the rib in this next one, and probably in this class, probably is, again, the one that struggles the most off her hind legs. She's just a little too tight in the way that she's built from behind. But you get her stopped. There's no denying that one's got as much power and real stuff to her as anything we have here in the class.
Your results from class number 5 of prospect breeding heifers. 10th place, Elizabeth Quick. 9th place, Adley Block. 8th place, Charlie Marinville. 7th place, Allison Taylor. 6th place, Ella Rogers. 5th place, Jackson Allen. 4th place, Turner Longacre. 3rd place, Madison McIntosh. 2nd place, Job Knight. And your class winner, Ryan Carlson. At this time, we will bring back our class winners for our judge to select your Division II champion breeding heifer.
Well, got a pretty captive audience. Let's give these young people a nice hand. They deserve it. Great division here, and the beauty of it is the quality. You know, again, I think every class was really strong and deep, and we had a lot of good ones to work with up here on the top end. I think, you know, quite honestly, you get them out here, and there's some similarities that work for me. These are females that, first and foremost, they look like females. They got, you know, kind of a dainty look to them. They're nice in the shape of their neck. I like the way all these cattle are constructed in their shoulder blade, their knee. I think they're flexible enough in their skeleton that they have some longevity to them, and to me, that's what's rewarding. And then, you know, there's a couple that are a little further along than the other out here, but again, for a heifer, they all have enough body for me. They have enough muscle. I think the nice thing is also we can use cattle that are still reasonably lean. I get a little frustrated, you know, watching shows and going to shows, and some of these little calves that are winning, they look like bred heifers, and I think calves need to look like calves. We need to kind of keep them pretty green in their conditioning, and I think there's, you know, plenty of them that win shows either as a calf or as a bred heifer that we just cook them. They're just too overdone, and again, I'm old school. I like them things to have some gas left in their tank and to be able to go, and I think there's one out here that I just, again, I just keep thinking better days ahead. You know, some will argue that she's not the one today because she's not got the extra punch to her, but I just think if there's one that I was to take home and make my boys feed and try to make a good yearling out of, and something we could come back a year from now to win a show, I think there's one that does that for me. So let's give them again all a nice hand, but especially our young lady here that came out of the second class. She will be the champion in this division. Congratulations. Good job, baby. Good hand. We talked about those two heifers in that class, and again, there's a lot of things that I think's easy to recognize in this heifer here, especially from her forerib back. Further along, good body cavity, good hair coat, a lot of things you like. And we beat her because I think I like the angle of her blade, the knee just a little bit better than that champion than her classmate, but that's a good heifer as well. The other one that I think fits very nicely with our champion is the heifer that comes out of class 3, not quite as collected in her top, but certainly functional in her structure. She'll be our reserve in this division. Congratulations. Red heifer will be third. Job, cowboy. Young man that won was second-tier champion will be fourth overall. Congratulations. And then we're going to come down here and use our class winner out of the first class in this division. She'll be fifth overall. Good job, partner. Congratulations. Good luck. Well, I'm not going to take a lot more of your time. Again, I was kind of a fill-in, and I hope Cheryl recovers quickly. My wife has always told me, and I had to pack by myself the other day because she was at school teaching, but she said, make sure you always take an extra pair of underwear and socks. You never know, you might have an accident. And I did that. I don't know why, but I actually stuck it in. And I'm glad, because I didn't have a change of clothes. I did find this tie laying in my pickup, but I'm glad that they give me the opportunity to come work this show. It's been just a lot of fun, really strong. And, the beauty of these jackpot deals early on, for us, we did them to kind of get them broke and get them to a show. The nice thing is each catalog got a year of showing ahead of them. So lots of things can change, and I'm sure they will. Another judge, another day, another opportunity to do well. The beauty of these things is, A, we get to exhibit at the National Western Stock Show in what I think is one of the most nostalgic coliseums that we have left in the United States. And again, that day when we move down there, it's going to be bittersweet because I still think of, my days in high school coming here and as a spectator 40-some years ago to come here and watch and just sit there, usually up on top because there were so many people, and watch a great big Hereford show, a great big Angus show. It was one of those deals that I'll never forget. And so we all get the opportunity today to get to show in here one more time. And again, as I've heard so many times, that this is undeniably one of the best shows in North America. And what I like about it, it's one of the most strongly supported by the state and the people within the state. Not maybe, do I mean Denver, but I mean the producers and the people that make their living in agriculture here in Colorado. This is what it's all about to them. And so just in short, I am honored to be able to come out here and do that. Again, congratulations to all of you. I like the first division winners. Those are all good cattle, but I really, really like all 5 of those that come out of the second division. So I'm going to keep it simple for bookwork, simple for everybody. 1 through 5, they just won that second division. Let's give them all a nice hand. That is 1 through 5 for the show. So congratulations, young lady. You'll have our champion all the way down to our cowboy here. He'll be 5th overall. Congratulations. Good job.
Your Grand Champion Prospect Breeding Heifer is Hannah Fox. Your Reserve Grand Champion Prospect Breeding Heifer is Ryan Carlson. Your 3rd overall Prospect Breeding Heifer is Job Knight. Your 4th overall Prospect Breeding Heifer comes from Justin Fannenbecker. And your 5th overall Prospect Breeding Heifer is from Blake Leapin. At this time, that does conclude the heifer portion of our prospect show. Congratulations to all of our exhibitors.